Welcome to the sleep paralysis tapes. Settle into the dark, pull the covers close, and let the heavy silence fill your room. Tonight, we descend into chilling tales of the unexplained. Before the screen fades to pitch black, I invite you to become part of this archive. If you have your own terrifying encounters, please contact me and I will narrate your story in a future tape. If these shadows bring you comfort, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Now, close your eyes. Do not look at the foot of your bed. Just listen and let us begin. He clicked the button. The results loaded. And this is where it started. David Mitchell lived his life in clean, predictable lines. He was 34. His apartment was on the third floor of a quiet building on 3rd Avenue in Cedar Rapids. His world was spreadsheets, takeout eaten at his desk, and the soft blue glow of a monitor. He ordered the ancestry test out of mild curiosity. A lark. Something to fill the quiet hours between finishing his reports and going to bed. The email arrived on a Tuesday evening, just after 7. He just closed a particularly stubborn file. He opened it without much thought. The Ancestry Link interface was sleek and modern. It showed a map of migration patterns he only half glanced at. His eyes went straight to the top of the page, to the section labeled Close Family Matches. There was one. The first match, the primary match. It's supposed to be a parent or sibling, a 50% link, give or take. This one said 100%. David stared. He was a data analyst. He understood what 100% meant. In genetic terms, it meant a direct lineage. A parent. A child. An identical twin. The match was listed as close family. Mother. The name beside it was Eleanor Gray. He leaned closer. The details were sparse, but they were there. Born 1942. Died 1972. Location, Lynn County, Iowa. David sat back in his chair. The hum of his computer fan was suddenly very loud in the quiet room. This was wrong. It was a clear, precise, and spectacular error. He felt a familiar itch, the one he got when a dataset was corrupted. When the numbers lied. A reasonable person might have laughed, might have shrugged and said glitch and moved on. But David lived in the world of errors, and errors had a texture. They were messy. They bled into other data. They created cascading failures. This wasn't messy. This was clean. A single, impossible fact sitting in a field that should have been empty. It felt placed. He picked up his phone. He called the customer support number listed at the bottom of the page. It was late, but the line picked up after 2 rings. The woman on the other end had a pleasant, practiced voice. She listened as he explained. He heard the soft tap of keys. "I'm seeing that, Mr. Mitchell," she said. Her tone was smooth and reassuring. "That's certainly an unusual one. Let me pull up the ticket." He waited. He could hear her breathing.
"Okay," she said. "I've got it flagged here in our system."
It's a known display issue with some of our older legacy profiles that were uploaded from archived public records. The database is pulling a placeholder name and date into the wrong field. Our engineering team is aware and they're working on a correction. She said it all in one fluid breath. It sounded like a script. Because it was. "A placeholder," David repeated. "That's correct. It should resolve within 24 to 48 hours. You should see the correct matches populate then." So the name, Eleanor Gray, that's just random data? A slight pause. "Just a beat." "It's a system error, sir. I do apologize for the confusion. Is there anything else I can help you with tonight?" He said no. He thanked her. He hung up. He looked back. The profile for Eleanor Gray was still there. born 1942, died 1972. 100% match. A known display issue. A placeholder. David's mind refused to settle. The part trained to find patterns in noise, to distrust clean answers to messy questions. A glitch in a billion-dollar genealogical database, and it just happens to pull a complete name, with birth and death years, of a woman from his own county? A woman who'd been dead for over 50 years? He took a screenshot. The action felt foolish but necessary. He saved the file. He labeled it Ancestry Error. October 17th. He closed the browser. He tried to go back to his work, but the lines of numbers on his spreadsheet seemed to swim. The quiet of his apartment, usually a comfort, felt different. It felt like the silence after a question has been asked and no real answer has been given. He kept thinking about the word she used. Placeholder. What was it holding a place for? He'd check again tomorrow, he decided. When the correction came through, it would be gone, replaced by a sensible partial match to a second cousin somewhere. It would be a funny story. That's what he told himself. But he didn't delete the screenshot. No, you need to understand something about David. He wasn't a believer in ghosts. He believed in data, in input and output, in cause and effect. What he saw was an effect, a very specific one, and he couldn't stop wondering about the cause. The night got later. The apartment got quieter. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping a brief silent arc across his ceiling. He was still sitting at his desk, in the dark, staring at the blank face of his monitor. He told himself he'd let it go. He went to work the next day. He crunched his numbers. He drank his coffee. The world was, on the surface, exactly as it had been. But that screenshot was still on his desktop. Ancestry error, 1017. By lunchtime, he'd opened it 12 times. A reasonable person would have stopped here. A glitch is a glitch. But David lived in the gaps between what the data said and what it meant. And this gap was a perfect, clean, geometric shape. It bothered him, like a single wrong pixel. You can't not see it. So after work, he didn't go home. He drove to the Lynn County Administration Building, the Public Records Office. It was a place of quiet, fluorescent-lit bureaucracy. The air smelled of old paper and dust. He approached the counter. A woman with kind eyes and a cardigan looked up. He cleared his throat. "I'm trying to find an obituary," he said. His voice sounded strange to him, too formal. "For an Eleanor Gray."
She died in 1972.
The woman nodded, as if requests for 50-year-old obituaries were perfectly ordinary. She led him to a microfilm reader in a back corner. The machine was an ancient beige box with a glowing screen. She produced a spool of film labeled The Gazette, 1972. "You know the month?" she asked. David shook his head. He didn't. "All right. The dial's a bit sticky. Just go slow." He thanked her. He was alone. The process was tedious. The film whirred. The pages blurred past in a gray streak of headlines about politics and local sports and advertisements for products that didn't exist anymore. He felt foolish. This was the action of a man who'd lost perspective. He was chasing a database placeholder. And then he saw it. Gray, Eleanor. November 14th, 1972. His heart did something slow and heavy in his chest. He leaned in, adjusting the focus. It was brief. A small column. It said she died peacefully at Mercy Medical Center after a brief illness. Pneumonia. She was 30 years old, a lifelong resident of Cedar Rapids. Survived by her son, James. Survived by her son, James. The room was very quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the microfilm reader's fan. Eleanor Gray was real. She had lived. She had died. And she had a son. David did the math in his head. The numbers clicked into place with a terrible automatic precision. If James was, say, 10 years old when his mother died in 1972, he would have been born around 1962. He would have been in his early 30s in 1995. 1995. He sat back. The vinyl chair creaked under him. He was looking for a ghost, but the ghost had a name, and now it had an age. The next day was Saturday. Washington High School was a red brick building not far from his apartment. He'd passed it 1,000 times. He parked in the mostly empty lot and walked to the main office. He had a story ready, something vague about family history research. The secretary, a younger woman busy with paperwork, barely looked up.
"Yearbooks are in the library," she said, pointing down a hall. "Alumni section."
"Just sign in." The library was deserted. The alumni section was a set of metal shelves against the back wall, filled with identical maroon bindings. He found the year, 1995. He pulled the heavy volume from the shelf and carried it to a study carrel. His hands were steady. He noted that. They were steady as he opened the cover. He flipped past the faculty pages, the club photos, the sports teams. He went to the sophomore class. He started with the G's. And there he was. James Gray. Sophomore. The photo was small, maybe an inch tall, black and white. The hairstyle was dated, a little shaggy on top, but the features, the shape of the eyes, the set of the jaw, the slight uneven quirk of the mouth that David had always tried to correct in the mirror, it was him. It wasn't a resemblance. It wasn't a cousin who looked similar. It was a perfect replication. The face staring out from that yearbook, frozen in 1995, was David Mitchell's own face. The face he shaved every morning. The face he saw in his driver's license photo. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. The silence of the library was no longer quiet. It was a dense, pressing weight. The air felt thin. This was no longer an error. This was a collision. A 100% genetic match to a dead woman. And her son, her biological son, was his mirror image. He closed the yearbook. The soft thud of the cover was incredibly loud. He stood up. His legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. He walked back to the shelf, slid the yearbook into its place, and left the library. He didn't sign out. He just walked out into the bright, ordinary Saturday afternoon. He sat there for a long time, the engine off, the only sound, the faint tick of the cooling metal. He thought about the word again. Placeholder. What was it holding a place for? And then a new question arrived, cold and simple. If James Gray looked exactly like him, where was James Gray now? He started the car. He drove home. Not to his apartment. He drove to his parents' house, the house he grew up in. He needed to see their faces. He needed to hear them say his name. He was going to ask them about his birth. He was going to ask if there was anything at all they had never told him. And as he drove, a single sentence looped in his mind, on a track he would never fully leave. I have a brother. And he is me. He drove to his parents' house on autopilot. The familiar streets blurred past. The trees, the mailboxes, the other houses, they all felt like a set, like a convincing backdrop he was about to walk behind. His parents, Robert and Susan, lived in the same split level he'd grown up in. The lawn was neat. The porch light was on. It was a picture of normalcy. He parked at the curb, not in the driveway. He didn't want his car to look like it belonged there. He sat for a moment, watching the living room window. He saw the flicker of the television and his dad's silhouette in his recliner. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. This was the point of no return. Once he asked the question, the answer would exist. And he could never unhear it. He got out of the car. The front door was unlocked. It always was. He stepped inside. The smell of pot roast and lemon polish hit him like a physical thing. It was the smell of his childhood. It was the smell of a story he now knew wasn't his.
"David?"
His mother's voice came from the kitchen.
"Honey, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you."
She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile was warm, then it faltered. She saw his face.
"What's wrong?"
"Are you sick?" His father muted the TV. "Everything all right, son?" David stood in the foyer, feeling like a stranger. He hadn't even taken his shoes off. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was flat. They moved to the living room. His dad stayed in his recliner. His mom perched on the edge of the sofa. David remained standing. He pulled the folded printouts from his jacket pocket. The obituary. The yearbook photo, enlarged and grainy from the library photocopier. He didn't hand them over. He just held them up. "Do you know this woman?" he asked. "Eleanor Gray. Died in 1972. His parents looked at the paper. Their faces were blank, confused. A normal parental confusion. "No," his father said. "Should we?" David then held up the yearbook photo. "This is her son, James Gray. He was a sophomore in 1995. His mother leaned forward, squinting. "He looks a bit like you, dear. Around the eyes."
"Is this a cousin?"
"A bit like me," David repeated. He put the papers down on the coffee table between them. "I took one of those DNA tests. Ancestry link, my top match, my only close match. Is Eleanor Gray a 100% genetic match, as if she's my mother?" The confusion on their faces didn't break. It solidified. It hardened into something else. His father's eyes flicked from the papers to David's face, then back to the papers. His mother's hand went to her throat. That's impossible," his father said, but the words had no force. They were just sound. "I know it's impossible," David said, his voice quiet. "So I need you to tell me what's possible." Silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. It filled the room. His mother's eyes welled with tears. They didn't fall. They just sat there, shining. His father looked down at his hands. They were clasped tightly in his lap. The knuckles were white. "Susan," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a surrender. David's mother let out a small, choked sound. A sob she'd been holding back for 34 years. She began to cry. Not loudly. It was a silent, shaking cry that seemed to come from a deep, hidden place of shame. His father looked up at David. His eyes were red. He looked old. He looked defeated. "We wanted a child," he began, his voice rough. "We tried for years. Nothing. The doctors, they said it wasn't going to happen. We were devastated." He took a shaky breath. "A friend of a friend knew someone. They told us about this service, a private agency. New Dawn Family Services. They said they helped couples in our situation. They worked with young women, college students, girls who found themselves in trouble and wanted a better life for their babies." David didn't move. He didn't breathe. "We met with a counselor, a woman. She was very kind, very reassuring. She said there was a healthy baby boy due in a few months. The mother was a student. She wanted a closed adoption. No contact, ever." His father's gaze was fixed on a point on the carpet. He couldn't look at his son. There was a fee, a facilitation fee. It was substantial, but we paid it. We would have paid anything. He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "You have to understand, we wanted you so much."
"We still do,"
his mother whispered, her voice shattered. They called us when she went into labor, his father continued. At Mercy Hospital. We waited. They brought you out to us, wrapped in a blue blanket. You were so small. A tear traced a line down his cheek. They gave us a single sheet of paper, a discharge form. It had your footprint, and the name Baby Boy Gray. Baby Boy Gray. The name hung in the air. It was the name of a ghost with his face. That was it, his father said, his shoulders slumping. No other paperwork. No lawyer present, just you. We brought you home. We named you David. We loved you. We have always loved you. He was crying openly now, a quiet, broken man crying in his recliner. David looked at his mother. She was staring at the yearbook photo on the table, her hand over her mouth. She was seeing it now. Not a resemblance, a replication. You never saw her, David said. It wasn't a question. His father shook his head. We were told it was better that way, for everyone. And this agency knew Dawn. You never dealt with them again? We tried a few years later. We thought maybe we could adopt a sibling for you. The phone number was disconnected. The address was a vacant office. It was like they'd never existed. David looked around the living room, at the family photos on the walls. Him as a gap-toothed kid. Him at graduation. Him with his parents at Christmas. A lifetime of moments. A beautiful, perfect fiction. The foundation of his life. The solid ground he had stood on for 34 years hadn't just cracked. It had vaporized. There was nothing under his feet. He had a question, but he couldn't give it voice. It was too monstrous. If James Gray was born in the early 1980s and I was born in 1989, and we share the same face, the same genes, then who am I? He didn't ask it. He just looked at his parents, the people he had called mom and dad for his entire life. He saw the same question reflected in their terrified, grieving eyes. They didn't know either. He didn't go home. He drove. The streets of Cedar Rapids passed in a blur. The life he knew was a shell, hollow inside. He had to know what filled it. New Dawn Family Services had left no trace, no business records, no old phone listings. It was a ghost. But ghosts leave echoes. It took him 3 days. 3 days of calling every nursing home and assisted living facility within 50 miles. He used a different story each time. A grandson looking for a family friend. A son wanting to give thanks. He felt sick with the lies, but the truth was a weapon he couldn't use. Not yet. Finally, a voice at the Evergreen Senior Residence recognized the name. Oh, Marion? Yes, she's with us. She doesn't get many visitors. The air inside smelled of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. A quiet, desperate cheerfulness hung in the lobby. He gave his name at the front desk. He said he was a distant relative. The young woman barely looked up. Room 114. Just down the hall. The door was slightly ajar. He knocked softly. A thin, papery voice said, "Come in." He pushed the door open. Marion Finch sat in a winged armchair by the window, a frail bird of a woman wrapped in a lavender cardigan. Her hair was a soft cloud of white. A photo album was open on her lap. She looked up with a gentle, practiced smile. The smile of someone who spent a lifetime reassuring people. "Hello," she said. "You must be David." He froze. He hadn't given his name at the door. She seemed to read his silence. The intercom. It crackles. I heard the girl at the desk. Her smile widened, but it didn't touch her eyes. They were pale blue and very sharp. "Please sit. It's so nice to have a visitor." He sat on the edge of a floral sofa. He felt like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. "Thank you for seeing me, Miss Finch." "Marion, please." She closed the album. "They said you were asking about New Dawn, such a long time ago. We did good work, helping families." Her gaze drifted to the window. "Creating them, really." David's mouth was dry. "My parents, Robert and Susan Mitchell. They were clients in 1989. Her eyes flicked back to him. She studied his face. The smile stayed, but it grew still. "Yes. I remember the Mitchells. A lovely couple. So much love to give." She said it like a recitation. "They told me you helped them adopt a baby boy." "We facilitated miracles," she corrected softly. "That's what we called it." "A private miracle." He leaned forward. The air in the room felt heavy. "The birth mother." The records were sealed. "But I found something. An anomaly." Marion Finch's hands resting on the album tightened slightly. "Her name was Eleanor Gray," David said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The effect was immediate. The gentle facade shattered. The color drained from her face. Her sharp eyes widened with a pure, animal fear. She looked at him as a threat, a ghost that had walked into her room. "No," she breathed. "That's not possible." "She died in 1972, David pressed. "Long before I was born. But my DNA says she's my mother, and her son, he looks—" He didn't have to finish. He saw her understand. She was looking at James Gray's face 30 years older. She was seeing the impossible. Her breath hitched. She looked toward the door as if expecting someone. When she looked back, her expression was one of profound, weary terror. She leaned forward, her voice a trembling whisper. "Young man, you need to stop. You need to go home and forget you ever heard that name." "Why?" David's own voice was a dry rasp. She glanced at the door again. Then she leaned in even closer. Her whisper was barely a breath against his ear. "We didn't deal in adoptions." She paused, her old eyes locked on his. "We dealt in corrections." The door opened. A nurse bustled in. "Everything all right in here, Marion? Time for your meds." Marion Finch leaned back in her chair. The terrified woman vanished. The gentle, smiling old lady returned. "Yes, dear. This nice young man was just leaving." Her eyes met David's one last time. They held a final, desperate warning. "Weren't you?" The nurse's presence was a wall. David stood up, his legs unsteady. He mumbled a goodbye. Marion Finch was already looking out the window, her photo album forgotten. She had retreated into a place he could not follow. He drove home in a silent daze. The word echoed in his skull. Corrections. Not adoptions. Corrections. What did that even mean? What was being corrected? He needed to see the proof again. The anchor in the madness. He got back to his apartment. The quiet felt different now. It felt watched. He went straight to his desk and woke his computer. He typed in the Ancestry link URL. The familiar login page didn't load. Instead, a blank screen appeared. A single line of text in the center read, "This domain name has expired. Please contact the site administrator." His blood went cold. He opened his downloads folder. He searched for the screenshot. The file was not found. He tried the search function. He checked the recycle bin. It was empty. He scrambled for the photocopies. The obituary. The yearbook page. He'd left them on his coffee table. The coffee table was bare. He stood in the center of his apartment, his breath coming in short gasps. The silence was no longer empty. It was a presence. It had been in his home. It had tidied up. He checked his email. The confirmation from Ancestry Link was gone. His entire sent folder, every query he'd sent, gone. It was a systematic, meticulous erasure. He sat down heavily on the floor, The room was spinning. Marion Finch's voice whispered in his mind, clear as if she were right beside him. "We dealt in corrections!" And he understood, with a chilling, absolute clarity. He was the anomaly. And they were correcting him. David didn't sleep that night. He sat on his living room floor, his back against the couch, staring at the blank space on the coffee table. The space where the photocopies had been. The air in his apartment felt used. Someone else's breath had been in it. He spent the next day at his computer, a cold cup of coffee going untouched beside him. He searched for New Dawn Family Services. He got nothing. No business filings with the Iowa Secretary of State, no archived Yellow Pages listings, no mentions in old newspaper articles about charitable organizations. It was a perfect clean erasure, as if the name had been invented, used for a single specific purpose, and then meticulously scrubbed from the world. He tried variations. New Dawn Adoption. New Dawn Cedar Rapids. New Dawn Family Agency. Nothing. He felt like he was typing into a void that was listening. He called his parents. It rang 5 times before his mother picked up. Her voice was a thin, frayed thread. "David, please, don't." "Mom, I just need to." "We can't," she whispered, and he could hear the raw terror in it. Not anger. Not sorrow. Terror. "We can't talk about this. We can't think about it. You have to let it go." "Did they contact you?" he pressed, his own voice harsh. "After I saw Marion Finch, did anyone call?" A long silence. Then, a soft, choked sound. "We're your parents. That's all that matters. That's all that ever mattered." And then the line went dead. He held the phone to his ear, listening to the dial tone. That was it. The foundation of his life. The love, the arguments, the Christmases, the quiet, boring, beautiful normalcy of it all wasn't just cracked. It was gone, replaced by this silent, shameful terror. They were afraid of him, or afraid of what he was. He wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. That's the thing about a mystery like this. It doesn't just give you questions, it takes things away. It takes your past. It takes your family. It takes the ground right out from under you. He lay in bed that night, in the dark, and the word played on a loop in his mind. Corrections. What did it mean? A correction implies a mistake, an error in a system. Was he the mistake, a biological paradox that needed to be hidden away? Or was he the correction itself, a solution poured into a space left empty by what? By James Gray. He thought of James, the boy in the yearbook, his face, his own face, frozen in 1995. Or was he corrected? The more he thought about it, the less any of it made sense, and the more it felt true. It felt true in a deep, sickening way that had nothing to do with logic. He felt like a book with the wrong cover, a file placed in the wrong drawer. He was a living, breathing error. And errors get deleted. A week passed. The silence around him solidified. His parents didn't call. Work became a blur of numbers that meant nothing. His apartment was no longer a home. It was the place where the truth had been. And then where it had been taken from. He'd cleaned up after the break-in. If it was a break-in, nothing was stolen. Nothing was disturbed. Just the evidence, gone. He'd straightened the cushions. He'd washed the coffee table. He'd tried to make it look like nothing had happened. But on his desk, face down, was one thing he'd saved. The one piece of evidence that wasn't digital, that couldn't be hacked and erased from a server halfway across the country. He turned it over. The yearbook photo. James Gray, sophomore. 1995. He tucked it into a book that night before he went to see Marion Finch. A random paperback on his shelf. They'd missed it. He looked at it now, under the lamplight. The grainy photocopy quality made it worse. It smoothed out the details, leaving just the essential lines. The shape of the eyes, the set of the mouth. It was him. Not a twin. Not a brother. Him. And this is where you have to understand the true horror of it. It wasn't about ghosts. It wasn't about secret agencies. It was about the self. The one thing you're supposed to be able to trust. Your own face in the mirror. David would look at that photo, and then he'd look at his own reflection in the dark window of his apartment. And he'd feel a disconnect so profound it was like vertigo. Which one was real? Which one was the original? Was he a copy? Or was he the ghost? He started sleeping with the photo on his nightstand. A reminder. A warning. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night, the room pitch black, and he'd know it was there. A piece of paper with his own face on it, staring into the darkness. He began to have a recurring thought, a terrible, logical thought. If New Dawn dealt in corrections, and he was the anomaly, then the process wasn't finished. Corrections are clean. They are complete. They leave no trace. It was a trace. One evening he came home from work and found his front door unlocked. He always locked it. Always. He stood in the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pushed the door open slowly. Nothing was out of place. The air was still. But on his desk, the yearbook photo was gone. In its place was a single, plain, white business card. No logo. No name. Just a phone number, printed in a simple, clean font. He didn't touch it. He just stared at it from across the room. The message was clear. They weren't erasing the evidence anymore. They were offering a conversation. The next step in the correction. He never called the number. He left the card there. A silent monument on his desk. He moved out a month later. He gave no forwarding address. He changed his number. He deleted his social media. He became, in every way he could, a ghost. But he kept one thing. He'd made another copy of the yearbook photo. At a library 20 miles away. He has it still. He looks at it sometimes. Not to remember who he is. He doesn't know that anymore. He looks at it to remember that he was. And if you're listening to this now, in the dark, maybe you understand. The story doesn't have a satisfying end. There's no reveal. No secret file that explains everything. There's just a man and a photo of another boy with his face and a word that hangs in the silence of a room. Corrections. It's the loneliest word in the world because it means you don't belong. You are a mistake in the system. And the system always finds a way to clean itself up. David Mitchell is still out there. Somewhere. But the man who clicked that button on the ancestry test? The man who lived on 3rd Avenue? He's gone. They corrected him. The tape has reached its end. I hope the stories tonight brought a pleasant chill to your spine as you drifted further into the dark. Thank you for braving the shadows here at the Sleep Paralysis tapes. If you are still awake, lying still in the quiet, remember to contact me with your own unsettling encounters so they can be added to our growing archive. As my voice fades away, let the silence of your room wrap around you completely. May your sleep be undisturbed, your doors remain locked, and your morning arrive safely. Until we open the tapes again, good night.